Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Africa Day 2021, celebrated by Sansa and its partners in the African continent, showcasing the power of space technology in unlocking socio-economic benefits for the African continent. It's celebrated under the theme, Expanding the Space Data Currency for the African Continent. We have a list of very, very powerful speakers, and I'm going to introduce them to you one by one, starting with the keynote address that will be provided by Dr. Valmon Sami, the CEO of Sansa. Just a bit of background on the CEO. Dr. Munsami holds a PhD in physics, a Master of Business Leadership, Space Studies Program, Diploma, and a certificate in International Air, Space and Telecommunications Law. He worked in South Africa's Secretariat for the Non-Proliferation of Weapons of Mass Destruction, managed the implementation of a suite of bilateral and multilateral science and technology agreements, was involved in the development of South Africa's national space strategy and national space policy, and oversaw the establishment of the South African National Space Agency, Sansa. On winning the bid in 2012 to co-host the Square Kilometer Array, SKA, the biggest radio astronomy project in the world, he became the chief specialist for astronomy and African space science. In this role, he led the development of South Africa's multi-wavelength astronomy strategy and the SKA readiness strategy for Africa, and conceptualized the model for the Pan-African Space Science University of the African Union. He also chaired the African Union Space Working Group, which was tasked with the development of the African space policy and the African space strategy that was approved by the African Union heads of state in January 2016, and also facilitated the implementation plan for the African Union Science, Technology and Innovation Strategy for Africa's TISA. As of January 2017, he has been appointed as the Chief Executive Officer of Sansa. He's currently a member of the South African Council for Space Affairs, SACSA, and the Vice President of the International Astronautic Federation, IAF, but currently chairs the IAF Administrative Committee for Developing Countries and Emerging Communities. He is inducted as an academician of the International Academy of Astronautics, IAA, and sits on the advisory board of the Space Generation Advisory Council, SGAC, and the United Arab Emirates International Space Congress. He also chairs the Committee of Heads of Organizations of Research and Technology cohort, which comprises of 21 science and technology institutions in South Africa. With that, I will give over to Dr. Valmon Sami for the keynote address.
Thank you, Dan. Thanks for the the introduction. Let me share my screen. Okay, thanks, colleagues, and thanks, Dan, for the kind introduction. So I'm going to talk about space and Africa sort of development and cooperation, but I just want to context what's coming through next from the speakers that follow, more from an African perspective. Sorry. I just wanted to look at the why aspect as to why space is so critically important for the African continent. You know, here's a sort of a map or a landscape in terms of what the African continent looks like. And then if you look at the surface area of Africa, it's about 30.3 million square kilometers. But if you sum up the land mass in terms of the surface area of China, US, India, Europe, Argentina, and New Zealand, it comes to about 30.2 million square kilometers. And if you notice that the surface area of Africa kind of just pips all of those countries and continents. In effect, Africa covers 20% of the Earth's land surface and accounts for 15% of the world's total human population. And you have to look at what other countries and regions are spending in terms of space budgets, and look at it from a scaling point of view in terms of what's required for the African continent. And that is when the reality hits in terms of where Africa is with regards to the rest of the world. And we did an exercise a few years ago where we took the African Union, the various directorates of the African Union, and we took stock of all of the objectives of the various commissions. And in total, we came up with about 40 different objectives of the African Union. Now, of those 40 objectives, 35 of them, if you actually interrogate them, actually require the use of space applications. And by far, one of the biggest areas that we are looking at from the African Union perspective is peace and security. In fact, I think about 60% of their budget is on peace and security. And so in totality, the work of the African Union in terms of the focus, there's a 90% reliance on space applications. Now, if you look at that from a policy perspective, one of the key drivers from a policy point of view for the African Union is the Agenda 2063. I think they've got about 20 different goals that they're looking at from the African Union perspective. And if you map that against the Sustainable Development Goals, the 17 goals, there's quite a neat mapping between the Agenda 2063 goals and the SDGs. And there again, there's a big reliance, at least 60 to 70% of the SDGs require space applications. If you take climate change as an example, 70% of your essential climate variables come from space platforms. So there's a very strong space reliance on the socioeconomic and environmental development on the African continent. So from that perspective, there's a big focus on space science and technology. So when we developed the African space policy and looked at the African space strategy, we started to look at the priority areas, and you'll notice that there's a good alignment with the societal benefit areas of the group on Earth observation. So the top nine essentially is a mapping for these SPAs of the Jio. But we also recognize there were other requirements from the African perspective. Peace and security is one, education, communications, trade and industry, and then also transport and infrastructure from the African perspective. So apart from the SPAs, those societal benefit areas, there were other requirements that were coming through very strongly in terms of what Africa required from the space program. But here's the difficulty. I think this came from a 2016, 2017 study, the Global Space Economy at a Glance, and they kind of segment what the contributions of the various countries are with regards to the space economy and look at the initiatives and what the returns on investment is and so on. And what's interesting at the bottom end, if you look at the space budgets, South Africa is ranked about 23rd, which means that of the African countries, only South Africa ranks in the top 30. But if you look at the number of publications coming out of the space domain, South Africa ranks in the top 30. It's in fact ranked 30th in the world in terms of publications. But if you take this from an African perspective, that's when the challenge starts to arise, is where is the rest of Africa or Africa collectively playing in terms of these kind of performance indicators. And so the budgets are totally inadequate compared to the scale of the problem we're dealing with in terms of the environment, in terms of the social and the economic issues that we're dealing from an African perspective. So with that kind of context in mind, around about 2012, 2013, there was work that was initiated around the African space policy and then the African space strategy. And that was essentially sort of technical experts coming together to craft what we call the African Space Agenda. Now, these two instruments were actually approved around about 2016 by the African heads of state. And there's a lot of context that's provided in both from the policy perspective and the strategy. So the policy more or less establishes the principles for an African space program, whereas the strategy is more the strategic focus of the lens in terms of the strategic direction Africa should follow with regards to, sort of setting the scene or the agenda for the African space program. So if you look at it from a policy perspective, there were sort of 6 high-level principles or objectives, we call them. And these were essentially, the departure point is addressing the user needs of the African continent, but also accessing space services. So access in terms of the actual infrastructure, access in terms of orbital, if you look at it from a telecommunications point of view, securing a geosynchronous orbit, frequency spectrums, and so on. So that access was quite critical in terms of ensuring that Africa has equitable access to the global space value chain. And then there was also a need for responding to the regional market, the African market. So if you look at the first one, is addressing the user needs, but how do you focus in terms of market segmentation? And even from that perspective, if you read the policy, it calls for even the RECs, the regional economic communities, setting up a particular space focus. And the reason for that is that if you look at West Africa, the user requirements might be very different from, let's say, Southern Africa. So Western Africa, very focused on, let's say, coffee and cocoa and oil reserves, which might be very different from Southern Africa. So there was a focus in terms of what would the different RECs start to focus on from a space program point of view. And then adopting good governance. If you've got 55 African countries, how do you collectively sound out what an African space program would look like? And the critical convergence points is around good governance, okay? And then that also leads to coordinating the African space arena. So once you have the good governance set down, so how do you coordinate? So this talks to the fact that you need a top-down, so in terms of an African space agency, but also bottom-up, taking into cognizance that national space programs have done a lot of investments. So you don't want to, for example, duplicate infrastructure. If a few countries have, let's say, assembly integration and testing facilities for satellite manufacturing, it's then not incumbent upon the African Space Agency to go and build an AIT facility. So the idea is around how do you bootstrap the existing capabilities and bring that into the African space program. And then the last one, probably out of my slide, is on intra-Africa collaboration. So African countries actually collaborating, and then also the international collaboration. So the key focus from the goals of the African space policy is looking at a coordinated African space program that is responding to the socio-economic, political, and environmental needs of the continent. And that goes back to Agenda 2063 and the SDGs. The second element is the regulatory framework, which more talks about Africa being responsible in outer space in terms of its activities. And then if you look at what has transpired in the last few years, we've seen about 20 different space agencies sort of coming up. And, probably 5-10 years ago, you had about 5 or 6 or maybe 7 space agencies in the continent. But suddenly you've seen a flurry of space agencies coming through. That in itself signals how national space programs are being seen from a national security point of view, from a national priority point of view. So countries are recognizing the importance and the value of space to a modern way of life. And so they've all started to move in the same direction in terms of setting up space programs. And I think this is where some of the key issues start to emerge in terms of the growth of the African space sector, purely because there's a demand for space data, and that is increasing exponentially. As Africa's in the past, since the space program has started on the African continent, we spent about $4 billion on satellite development today. But if you look what happened in the last year, in 2019, the budgets were around $250 million. But in 2020, that was about $490 million. That's the budgets of the national space programs, and also given the growth in the African space agencies. And then what should be noticed is that Africa will be launching about 110 new satellites by 2024, compared to 41 satellites that has been launched to date. So you're seeing a significant growth And speaking to what we're discussing here today is on that data currency, is how do you leverage on the data to bring about the changes that's required on the African continent. And so the key drivers that we're seeing in terms of collaboration is the increasing number of satellite projects. So how do we collaborate around that aspect? Expansive space industry landscape. We're seeing even in South Africa, the industry is starting to organize itself. And now we're starting to differentiate what is the role of the space agency versus the industry. And that's happening across Africa. There's policy changes. Even in South Africa, we got a new sort of act coming through, the Space Affairs Act, purely because the policy drivers have changed. Space for Sustainable Development. All African countries, in fact, globally, there's a commitment to the SDGs. How do we sort of center around that and bring collaboration around that? And then we also see rising foreign interest in Africa. You'll see China, Europe. We'll talk about GMS in Africa later in the program. So how do you collaborate around those kind of collaborative initiatives? And so I think where we're starting to find ourselves in terms, even on the data side, is how do we, as developing nations, work with emerging nations and developed nations? And there's a couple of cross-cutting points that we should be cognizant of. Ensuring that there's high-level political support for your space program is very critical. Financial resourcing, in terms of having the adequate financial resources. There's technology readiness, the technology maturity aspects, the human capital aspects in terms of training of masters and PhD students and your experts. And then the last one is the infrastructure. How do we collectively collaborate around infrastructure rather than duplicating it across the continent? And we've seen some quite neat models around the latter aspects of what I'm putting down. So for example, I know many years we were talking about India, Brazil, and South Africa, where we were looking at building a satellite, but we said, why don't South Africa put the satellite bus in, Brazil puts in the payload, and India launches this thing. So you can find very nice collaborative models around how we can look at specific initiatives. On the right-hand side is in terms of how we can leverage on the problems we experience on the left-hand side. So how do countries that have been there and done that demonstrate the socioeconomic benefits to those that are still coming out of the starting block? How do we ensure there's prioritization in terms of financial resourcing? How do we ensure technology transfer in terms of knowledge transfer as well? And then the last one is in terms of the infrastructure, how do we ensure that there's prioritization given to different types of infrastructure? So the governance framework, the implementation cost, and even the geopolitics all come into play. So I think from an African perspective, given what's happening, the growth and the interest and the demands, I'm putting on the table the different policy perspectives you need to look at from a collaboration point of view. And then landing on the last slide that I have here is in terms of taking cognizance of systemic issues that countries face on the left-hand side and how countries that have cracked it can actually assist in the terms of collaboration and ensuring that Africa sort of works together and plays together going forward. So I want to stop there, Dan, and thank you for the attention.
Thank you, Dr. Sami, for that wonderful presentation. It highlights the most important issues, the context around space technology. Thank you for that. And I'm gonna, without waste of time, move to our next speaker, who's gonna give us a short presentation on space weather solutions for the African continent. Dr. Mpho Chisapungu is a space weather practitioner at the South African National Space Agency in Hermanus. She is responsible for coordinating and managing the Space Weather Center, as well as ensuring that the space weather services reach the end users. Her role includes monitoring and analyzing space weather events and preparing space weather forecasts, warnings, and alerts for government and private industry users. Mpho Chisapungu's academic journey started when she received a Bachelor of Science degree in Mathematics and Physics from University of Venda. Thereafter, she studied for an honors degree under the National Astrophysics and Space Science Program, NASP, at the University of Cape Town in 2007. She then furthered her studies with a master's degree in physics at Rhodes University between 2008 and 2009. Her career in space science started in 2010 when she was offered a contract position as a space weather assistant at Sansa. During her career, she has presented about space weather activities and research projects at Sansa that Sansa is involved in, and at different international workshops and conferences such as the European Space Weather Week, European Geophysical Union, International Reference Ionosphere Workshop, International Heliospheric Year, and the South African Institute of Physics. She now holds a PhD degree in physics from Rhodes University. Without waste of time, Dr. Chisapungo, the stage is yours.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm just going to share my screen. Thank you very much. Good afternoon to everyone. So I will speak about the space weather solution for the African continent. In my presentation, what I will cover is what space weather is and why should we care, providing a solution and the regional representation, and then I will conclude. What is space weather? We have many definitions of space weather, but I will just highlight the two. Space weather refers to the conditions on the sun, in the solar wind, magnetosphere, ionosphere, and the thermosphere that can influence the performance and reliability of spaceborne and ground-based technological systems. Space weather is a consequence of the behavior of the sun, the nature of the Earth's magnetic field, and the atmosphere, and our location in the solar system. And why should we care about space weather? The technology continues to play an ever-increasing role in our society, and the potential for space weather to impact our daily lives is also growing, especially as we move into the fourth industrial revolution, 4IR. Technology infrastructure, including power grids, satellites used for communication and navigation, and the Internet of Things are vulnerable to space weather effects caused by the sun's variability. As you can see this image, it shows most of the technologies that can be affected by space weather. So if we have space weather events like the solar flares, we have coronal mass ejection, you can see that the astronauts, they can get impacted by space weather, or they can get exposed to radiation. We have also the aviation. Space weather can impact aviation. And then we have satellite communication. The signals which we are receiving from satellite, they can get attenuated or distorted as we receive them on the ground. And providing the solution, Sansa Space Weather Center was launched in December 2010, and it was upgraded, and then we relaunched it again in April 2018. And currently, they are constructing a new space weather center, which will open next year in 2022. This new space weather center will be operating 24/7. And at Sansa, we pride ourselves by providing the right information in the right format at the right time to the right people to enable and facilitate the right decisions. And what we do at the Space Weather Regional Warning Center, we observe, monitor, run the models, do space weather forecast, and predict the space environment and its impact on our technology. This includes the space weather research and the model developments. And we also do space weather forecasting and then the high frequency prediction. We send out the warnings and alerts to the users, and we prepare as well as the bulletins. We also hold a weekly tours at the Space Weather Center, the information days, as well as training for the users as well. And there's also expansion and usage of data network, which will be covered later in these presentations. And the space weather operations. So in the Space Weather Center, we are monitoring the Earth space systems predictions and forecast. We distribute data and creating new knowledge on the system, providing space weather information to operations in the defense, energy, and aviation sectors. And this is the space weather information for aviation. So the space weather phenomena relevant to the whole flight route has been added to the flight plan information to be provided to operators and flight crew members. Space weather information shall be provided as part of the flight documentation. Sansa has received designation as a regional center for space weather information provision from the International Civil Aviation Organization. Our space weather advisory information will include one or more of the following effects: the high frequency HF communication, the satellite communication, Gnss based navigation and surveillance, as well as radiation exposure at flight levels. Just to mention that we have 5 space weather centers, regional centers, which are designated by ICAO. And South Africa is one regional center. And then the global centers have already started sending the advisories to the aviation sector since last year in November 2019. And then next year in November 2022, we will be visited by the International Civil Aviation Organization again for the audit, so that we can start providing also the space weather information to aviation on a regional capacity. And the regional representation, how does the Africa respond to a global challenge? As Sansa Space Weather Center, we are a member of the International Space Environmental Service. Out of this is a global community of space weather centers, and we have about 22 regional warning centers for space weather, and South Africa is one of the 22 regional centers. And we also represented on the World Meteorological Organization, and then the UN COPIAS, as well as ICAO expert groups on space weather. So we contribute some space weather information in those international bodies. We provide the high quality regional data, is benchmarked with international database to deliver accurate, well-deserved information. And we also a regional designation as space weather information provider for the International Air Navigation Service. And Sansa is also leading the ICAO MET Project 3, entitled Implementation of Annex 3 Provision related to space weather requirements within the AFI region. And within the Space Weather Center, we have a research group which does develop the models that we can use within the space weather operations to be able to provide the service or the space weather information to the users. So this one is one of the African ionospheric map. And then we utilize this space science to develop solutions over the African continent. And then this ionospheric map, we use it to monitor the conditions under which communications are established. So it gives us an indication of how frequencies can be affected over the African region. And this applies to the defense, maritime, and transport sectors, as well as aviation. Through space weather, Sansa is providing for the development agenda as follows. We are contributing to the growth and development of knowledge within the continent, research, training, and students, growing the knowledge economy and provision of knowledge platforms. So we do host some international African partners to exchange of knowledge and do the research here at Sansa. Utilizing space know-how to protect our technology and planet to ensure a sustainable future for all. Development of an African instrumentation network, which John Ward will present in the coming presentations across the continent that forms the foundation for knowledge, education skills, and application. So the data instrumentation network will enable us to be able to have a regional perspective of the impact of space weather, and we have a good coverage if we expand our African instrument over the region. And providing unique solutions on the African continent to space and non-space sectors, solving challenges in safety and security, maritime, energy, and transport. And in my conclusion, these space weather events can create vulnerabilities within our technology dependencies and is a risk to the 4IR. Space weather affects safety of life principles for aviation operations, and compliance with ICAO is now a requirement. Sansa is addressing operational capability for space weather information provision as a service to the African region. Sansa will continue to utilize its existing capability and global networks to ensure that the most optimum solution for dealing with the threats for space weather is developed for the continent. Sansa will continue to partner with various role players to ensure an adequate readiness level on both sides, provider and users, for space weather information. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mpho, for that wonderful presentation. We are very grateful to see the good work that is done from the geomagnetically quiet Hermanas in service to the continent of Africa. To the audience who would like to pose questions, you can please use the Q&A function for your questions, and then at the end, we've made provision for answering the Q&A questions. The panelists will take them. I'll direct them all to the CEO of Sansa, and then he will decide who's most appropriate. Okay, without waste of time, I'm gonna move on to our next speaker, who's going to provide us a presentation on improving disaster resilience through Sawidra RAR's project. Abani Ahmed Ali is going to take us through that. Let me introduce him. He's a graduate in computer science with mathematics, had a university degree in computer sciences with mathematics, Federal University of Technology, Mina, Niger State, Nigeria, 1998, and has many other certificates and qualifications in information and communication technology, such as high performance computing, database training, Joint African Adaptation Plan, PUMA, African Monitoring of the Environment for Sustainable Development, Telecommunication Station, System Administration, Regional Advanced Retransmission Service, RARS, Telecommunications Expert, SAWIDRA, ACMAD project, 1 July 2017 to 30 October 2020, which led to the installation and operationalization of 4 RARS ground stations in Gabon, Kenya, South Africa, and Niger. Previously occupied the international position of Chief Computing and Telecommunications Department at African Center of Meteorological Applications for Development, ACMAD, from July 2007 to June 2015, as well as the positions of IT and database management specialist from July 2015 to June 2017. He also performed the functions of acting chief IT department during vacancy period of the position, managed and gave strong contribution to the development of the integrated systems such as the dynamic concept of African meteorological and environmental system, AMEDIS, at ACMAD. Similarly, we gave strong contribution to the rural communications through the famous project called RUNET, which has become also a concept of integrating ICTs to reach users in remote and rural areas, including in local languages. As a consequence of that project, Niger Republic has today a network of more than 120 community radios, conducted many trainings and consultancy activities on rural communication systems, satellites, and integrated systems technologies for the benefit of African meteorologists and various partners. With more than 20 years continuous working experience gathered at ACMAD, out of which 13 years at senior management position, the international working environment, the rapidly evolving ICTs, it has been a good experience in providing expected support and service to allow our institution reach its goals and mission. Without wasting time, I will allow Ali to take us through the presentation.
Just sharing screen. Hello, once again, good afternoon. Can you see the screen, please?
Please proceed, we can see it.
Yes, okay. So I'm going to share with you the experience of the SAWIDRA project, the Satellite and Weather Information for Disaster Resilience in Africa, which is falling under the African, Caribbean, and Pacific with the European Union program for building disaster resilience to natural hazard in the sub-Saharan region and countries for the communities. This project falls under the result area number 3, which is the capacity building of national and regional climate centers under the overall project of the ACP EU program. And it has been funded by through the African Development Bank, AFDB. The main activities of this project are falling in the heart of the thematic of this Africa Days, which are the establishment of the RARS network, which is the Regional Advanced Retransmission Service Network, to improve the observation in Africa. And the next component was the numerical weather prediction component of the project for data assimilation and improving the quality of the forecast in Africa, with a key component there, which is the acquisition of high performance computing infrastructure to facilitate data processing. And assimilation process. Then finally, there is what we call the adding value and the early warning and the DRR for climate services that are going to benefit from all this infrastructure. Initially, the regional advanced retransmission service coverage was very poor over Africa, as you can see by the figure. With the Sawidra project, the regional advanced retransmission service coverage in Africa was able to cover the overall of the continent by the installation of 4 XL band antennas in targeted countries, which are Niger, Gabon, Kenya, and Sansa, as you can see in the picture. The RARS, the Regional Advanced Retransmission Service Africa Data Flow chart is shown here, with the space segment targeting the reception of data through a group of about 9 satellites, main ones being the METOP A, B, and C, NOAA 19 and 18, and then the SNPP and GPS satellite, as well as the Pangyang are targeted satellites to be disseminating data through the RANET station, the RAR stations. So, and on the ground segment, we have the 4 stations installed that I showed on the previous slide. One in Niger, Gabon, and Sansa and ICPAC. So another important component was the establishment of the Sawidra communication network, which was to allow the station share data and defining an aggregation center. Targeted ones were the Sansa in South Africa, where all stations will use about 2 megabits bandwidth each, aggregate data in one of the center, with the perspective to be able to share the data through the hub of the South African Weather Service to the global telecommunication system of the WMO. So this is the global data flow chart. The project has gone through an implementation plan with the challenge of COVID-19 situation. The project was able to manage and install all the stations and make them operational. You have here like the image of all these stations installed. You can see the Kenya station, the RAS station in Agios on the top pictures, and then Sansa RAS station and the Niger RAS station. This is the monitoring side, the far east, the satellite monitoring software on the Niger station. In December 2020, we were monitoring the passes of the satellite and harvested some sample data. With the sample data. So the product receipts are going to be used for adding value to the forecast and then building resilience in the region through the regional climate centers. One of the added value service in real time is to be able to detect like active fire detection. So the important component in the weather prediction is to acquire the high performance computing system to allow centers process the data and then improve the forecasting. So at least 2 of the regional climate centers in West Africa are able to acquire and install those high performance computing systems. One of the challenges is the post-Sawidra situation the maintenance and both hard and soft issues. And then the infrastructure installed is a high power consuming system. We have also some plans to develop there. And then as well as the supporting the telecommunication cost, which is very, very high for the inland countries such as Niger. And also training Africans or future generation on the use of the RAS network and the exploitation of it. So we also have non-meteorological data passing through the station, which can be used for adding value to the RAS stations that have been installed. So we can think of data archiving and then development of new ideas and projects. So the center is also using this infrastructure to improve the modeling capacities in the region and also train people from the national meteorological and hydrological services in improving their skills in programming so as to the best bonify from this infrastructure. Another important point is the plan for the numerical weather prediction applied research and development to this project because of the high quality of data received and the possibility to develop more research applications. And then another important point is the on-the-job training activities using the high performance and NWT program. The center used to bring the staff from national meteorological and hydrological services, as well as the regional climate centers, to improve their skills in the areas of weather forecasting and climate sciences using this infrastructure. And finally, we can use this infrastructure to make some case studies as we have many surrounding surveying cases in the area of weather and climate coming to that needs to be investigated. So thank you very much. That's the end of this. Thank you.
Thank you, Ali, for a wonderful presentation. We now are going to move over to our next speaker. And thank you for keeping to the time. I'm going to move a little bit faster and encourage you to now keep to the time that is allocated on the program because we are running a little bit behind schedule. Expanding Africa's data currency is our next speaker, the African Instrumentation Network by Jonathan Ward. Jonathan is a manager who manages engineering and data acquisition at the South African National Space Agency in Hermanus. His unit is responsible for supporting Sansa's instrumentation network located across Africa, Antarctica, and the Southern Ocean. Jonathan holds a master's degree in electrical engineering from the University of Cape Town. Specialized areas of study are radar, remote sensing, high-frequency electromagnetics, and space applications. He's a veteran of the South African National Antarctic Program, SANAP, and overwintered at Sinai in 2011-2012 and visited the continent for 3 relief voyages between 2013 and 2015. Without waste of time, Jonathan, please, the stage is yours.
Thank you very much, Dan, for the introduction. And hello to everybody that's joining us. So I'm going to talk about the African Instrumentation Network, which is one of the flagship projects that we are currently working on in the Engineering and Data Acquisition Unit, which is part of the Space Science Program from Amanis. So just a brief outline of my talk. I'll give a brief background on the Instrumentation Network, what the current status is, and what we hope to do with it in the future. I'll talk a little bit about the new equipment that we are planning to roll out to other African countries. And I think the best way to actually describe the impact that this project is having is to sort of just to go through a bit of a case study, and that will be the successful implementation of a Gnss network in Zambia. And then I'll just wrap up with the highlights and the opportunities that we can get from this network. So the Sansa Instrumentation Network in Southern Africa is quite extensive, as you can see by the diagram. We've been actually operating for more than 80 years from the facility in Amanis. So I think it's fair to say that we've had some time to build up this impressive network that includes 4 internationally recognized geomagnetic stations, 4 ionospheric sounding radars, and many other instruments. We've got approximately 80 instruments that are spread across 20 individual sites. And we produce anywhere between 6 and 10 terabytes of data per year. What you may not have noticed on the previous slide is that I failed to map out all the locations of the GNSS receivers. And that's because South Africa already has a very well-established and very stable GNSS cores network. So GNSS stands for Global Navigation Satellite Systems, and CORS stands for Continuously Operating Reference Receivers. And the South African CORS network is run by Trignet. So as Dr. Chisapungo mentioned earlier, one of the key things that they're trying to do in the Space Weather Center is to map the condition of the ionosphere. And GNSS receivers are very good at monitoring the ionosphere. They are used in numerous other sectors, and so we are actually able to capitalize on using the existing network as well. So a very well established instrumentation network in Southern Africa, as well as a stable GNSS cores network. But if we look at the rest of Africa, this is what the African GNSS cores network looks like. And the source of this is from the cores map project, but it was put together with crowdsourcing. So the figures are only really verifiable in South Africa, Ghana, Uganda, and Mozambique. So we need a much more accurate picture in the future, and we still need to open the right doors and contacts if we want to capitalize on this existing infrastructure in Africa. So the route that we've planned to take is to procure 8 new Septentrio receivers, and these are state-of-the-art ionospheric monitoring GNSS receivers. They're multi-frequency, multi-constellation, which means that we are not only able to receive the information from the from the GPS constellations, but also the other constellations such as the Russian GLONASS, the European Galileo, etc. We use high precision geodetic choke ring antennas. And these receivers are going to have a real-time output. We're no longer collecting campaign data. We want the information as soon as we can so that we can actually generate the products and services in real time. and we want to be able to control them remotely. What is special about this flavor of GNSS receiver is that it not only monitors TEC, which is the number of charged particles, or its number of electrons in the ionosphere, but it can also monitor scintillations, which are very small changes in amplitude and phase of the signal as it passes through our upper atmosphere. So we have already, if you look at the current status of the African Instrumentation Network, we already have 2 stations in Namibia, and these ones are monitoring TEC only. We have a station in Kenya, which is monitoring both scintillation and TEC, and we are in the process of installing the next receiver in Lagos, Nigeria. The main ingredient for a successful installation is a reliable partner. And so we've tried various routes, and some of our sites are hosted by other government institutions, such as in Namibia. But we've also found that we can be very successful by partnering with another African university. And so that's what I want to share with you, what we did with Zambia, where we installed 2 GNSS receivers, one being the one that I just described to you earlier, that monitors the scintillation and the TEC, and then one that just monitors the TEC. Yeah. So this is the receiver that we installed at the Kwame Nkrumah University, which is in Kabwe in Zambia. And you can see we've installed the antenna on the roof. And then we're able to package the electronics and the receiver components nicely. So all that you really need is space on a roof and space in a small office and access to reliable power and internet. So another advantage of going with the GNSS receiver is that you don't need to spend a large amount of money to get a lot of value. So this way we're getting the most bang for our buck. At the same time, we were able to engage with a lot of the students and a lot of the learners during our visit. When we initially arrived, we thought that we were going to only be presenting to 50 people, and we ended up losing count somewhere between 250 and 300 students. And so we were really sort of able to engage with a lot of students and to generate a lot of interest in a space science program. So then when we met with the Vice Chancellor and the deans of all the schools, we were sort of able to build the foundations of a space science curriculum at the university. And so our station that we've installed there will not only be used by Sansa, but will hopefully in the future also be used by the students and by the staff at the university. And hopefully one day that will pave the way for a homegrown network of GNSS receivers, and they'll be able to operate and maintain them with our support. We also installed a GNSS receiver in Chavuma, which is on the Angolan border. This is actually a education resource center that serves approximately 20 schools in the area. So we were able to hold a workshop for 20 of the science and mathematics teachers in the area, and to teach them about space weather and why it's important for them to host this equipment. Another value add is that we were actually able to provide Wi-Fi internet for the resource center, which is now being sponsored by the university, so that they have better access to resources and information. So just to highlight the opportunities, the African Instrumentation Network's aim is not only to expand Sansa's instrumentation network, but to foster collaboration with other African institutions to promote and possibly develop more space science curriculums with university partners. The instrumentation provided by Sansa will serve as a proof of concept for homegrown, self-funded instrumentation networks that Sansa can support in the form of training, and will also generate a lot of science awareness and engagement and excite the youth, to become more interested in these topics. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jonathan, for a wonderful and captivating presentation. When I see science engagement and awareness, I get excited. And without waste of time, I'm gonna move on to our next speaker, who is going to give us a presentation on the Jio Initiative, Earth observation making impact for societal good. Phoebe Odo from RCMRD. Phoebe is currently working as the point of contact regional coordinator for the Jio Secretariat based at RCMRD in Kenya, Nairobi. Her role includes regional coordination of Jio and Jio activities within the continent and engagement with the Jio Secretariat and Jio community. The overarching goal being the promotion and use of Earth observation data by governments in decision-making processes. Jio objectives are aligned with those of Jio to support the implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals, Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction 2015 to 2030, the United Nations System of Environmental and Economic Accounts, and the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. Jio delivers its impact through the application areas of water resource management, sustainable forest management, land cover, data and infrastructure, as well as food security and agriculture. Implementation is mostly done through capacity building, resource mobilization, and communication. Some of the Jio initiatives that we have been engaged in include GeoGLAM, Geo Land Degradation Network, Digital Earth Africa, and the Geo Blue Planet, just to mention a few. Further, she leads the land use land cover mapping activities of the Severe Eastern and Southern Africa project and has passionately participated in creation of land cover data for 10 countries in that region so far to support governments with the much critical data set for responding to varied development issues ranging from deforestation to sustainable use of land. She's also the point of contact for gender-related issues in the organization and has been working in strategy development and promotion of gender and social inclusion at an institutional level and also integrated externally in service level delivery. She's a member of Geo EDI subgroup, Digital Earth Africa, GEDSI working group, technical advisory board for the Earth Observation Africa Research and Development Facility. Without wasting any time, Phoebe, I hand over the stage.
Thank you, Dan, for the apt introduction. I want to make a presentation to what Jio Initiative is about and the societal benefits derived from it. So basically, Jio is an initiative for the African community NGO that is aimed to coordinate Africa's participation and guide to ensure that the interests of Africa NGO are actually taken into account. So we work with government to raise awareness and develop capacity of EO in governments and research organizations. We have been working as a framework for strengthening partnerships and collaboration in Africa. We're also the gateway for international partners in Africa, especially those that want to support any development activities that utilize Earth observation. Further to this, we support the implementation of geo activities and programs within Africa. So much critically, we are working towards strengthening the connections for all the geo principles in Africa, the participating organization, and ensuring that we are increasing the membership of geo in Africa. We advise and advocate for use of EO to promote long-term human capital development in program and also in decision-making processes. We also facilitate and drive programs towards achieving a global and regional and national agendas such as the Vision 2030 for SDGs, the Sendai Framework, as well as the Paris Agreement. We support international collaboration by connecting national and regional institutions with GEO and other regional GEO members. We foster creation of synergies, particularly to avoid duplication of efforts, and liaise with the GEO Secretariat to ensure synergies and streamlined operation. Further, we are advocates for EO for decision-making processes and to ensure that the benefits of Earth observations are realized. In terms of membership, GEO has 30 member countries out of 54. And in the last 2 years, we've been able to add 3 new countries, with Rwanda, Sierra Leone, and Namibia coming on board. So what are the priority action areas for AfriGeo? So we work in 6 main priority action areas. So in agriculture and food security, in water and resource management, in sustainable forest management, urban development, in land cover, and also in soils to support agriculture. And all this is supported either through development of user needs and applications, or through research mobilization, or through communication and outreach, as well as capacity building. Further to this, we also work towards ensuring that within Africa, data and infrastructure that is going to deliver all that is required to support Earth observation is realized. And some of the programs that are supporting this infrastructure and connectivity include Digital Earth Africa. So we have the AfriGeo implementation plan that you can look through later. Some of the best practices that we take pride in is we particularly like to look for use cases where Earth observation is being used to basically undertake and solve different developmental challenges. So whether this is related to disaster risk reduction, or in terms of early warning systems, or providing information related to water, or just understanding how our environment is changing. So the application areas are many. And if you remember from the first presentation given by Val, was that 90% of all actions that AUC is proposing are all relying on Earth observation data. So the implementation of activities are particularly driven by needs of the member states. So every now and then we will request for members to send in what their priority needs are, and see how best we can be able to support this through Earth observation. We operate a lot through communities of practice. So this would be communities of practice around the priority action areas. But ideally within these communities of practice, we're trying to ensure that the community is talking to each other to understand what the challenges are, how they're being addressed by different countries, if there are any learning lessons from different countries, and what they can be able to adopt to address some of the challenges they are facing as a country. Further to this, we support a lot collaborations, value addition. So in data that is already existing, how can we utilize this to make sure that as countries we are benefiting, and also we are able to receive the information as we require. The other best practices that we advocate for is the alignment to national and regional priorities, because this is really the only way that we're going to ensure that adoption is realized. When countries see that we are working towards helping them to realize what their priorities are. Of course, the component of continuous engagement such as this is very important because it enables us to be aware of what is happening around the continent, at the same time understand how technology is changing and how we can be able to adapt to that to suit our needs. The issues for inclusion is something that we cannot run away from. Youth and women are very key to the Africa Agenda 2063, and we're trying to ensure as AfriGeo that we are including the youth in our activities, we are including the women, and we're including the indigenous communities as well. Further to this, we support a lot the regional geo exchanges, and this would be exchanges that each and every region has its own regional geo. So there's AmeriGeo, there's Asia Geo, and there's Euro Geo. So once in a while, we collaborate to see what the other regional geos are doing and how we can be able to learn from them. So just to give you a snippet on what the working groups are doing. So this is like a case situation for the working group on statistics. And in this working group, part of the objectives include sharing experiences, sharing good practices, a joint outreach and promotion in terms of decision making. The statistics institution in Africa are one that is mandated to respond to a lot of indicators, particularly in relation to SDGs. So Earth observation plays a very critical role in terms of helping them to be able to achieve all these requirements that they are supposed to be able to respond to. Further to this is to leverage the global, continental, and regional networks within these areas. And this is another example. With the pandemic, there has been more or less, everybody was caught flat-footed. So the best way to go about it is to see how different countries are utilizing Earth observation in terms of response. What are the critical Earth observation data that every country needs to have? And within the working group, we've been able to share some of these resources that many countries are not even aware of that have been provided and are easily accessible. So some of this data is actually very high resolution data. For population, for high resolution imagery for cities. And this really helps in terms of planning and also to understand how the different populations are getting affected by COVID. So further to this, we do a lot of linkages with the member states. So I will just give a case situation for 3 countries that we've been able to engage with. So last year we had a meeting with the Minister of State of Environment in Nigeria. And ideally, through this meeting, we're trying to pitch what are the values that they can be able to obtain from AfriGeo NGO. And you realize that within AfriGeo NGO, there's a lot of programs and activities that are taking place that can be able to support the member countries in terms of understanding how, for instance, the environment is changing through GFOI, that is basically like a forest observatory initiative. And through that, you're able to understand the deforestation and the deforestation and degradation rates in your countries. There's also GeoBond that is looking at the critical biodiversity and how that is changing as well. We're also able to support some of the upcoming space agencies. So most recently, we have Rwanda and Uganda launching their space agencies, and it's critical that they understand that an initiative that AfriGeo exists and how we can best support them in terms of response. We also take note that these space agencies are very critical in each and every country. In the last 2 years, we've seen that number grow significantly in terms of budgeting and in terms of counts. There are more space agencies now, and these are going to be responding to different sectors of the economy. I also want to talk about this hackathon that we did, particularly to inspire the youth. I think you may be aware of the challenge we had with the desert locust, which is a great threat to food security in the Horn of Africa. So the desert locust crisis is still there. However, the role that Earth observation can play is very critical. So this particular hackathon that was supported also through AfriGeo was to teach the youth how they can be able to utilize different Earth observation data in terms of monitoring and also in terms of understanding the threat to food security that is posed by the swarms, and also just look at possible environmental situations that can drive the swarms and create suitable environment for them to grow and increase in numbers. I want to also talk about the Digital Earth Africa. So basically, the Digital Earth Africa is now a Jio initiative since last week. And basically, what Digital Earth Africa is bringing on board is a resource that is immense in terms of providing analysis-ready data. So this means that one, we are saving on costs, the value addition in terms of the capabilities that we get from Digital Earth Africa is immense for responding and also contributing to a lot of development challenges ranging from food security, water, and many others. But what I also want to mention is that Digital Earth Africa has tried as a program very much to be very inclusive in terms of ensuring that the capacity that they have is within the different regions. So we have in each and every region an institution that is part of the technical advisory committee and also as an implementing partner. So the role played as an implementing partner is to develop part of the programs and also to operate as a training of trainer. So the part of their key objectives is also to increase and strengthen human capacity. And I have a link here of some of the training they have been able to develop. So it's basically a suite of 6 different training sessions that teaches you how you can be able to harness the data cube for different applications. So whether you're trying to monitor how forest is changing or how water is changing in your environment, then you can be able to do that. In terms of delivery of products, Digital Earth Africa does this either as satellite-based products. So here you're going to see that within the data cube, you can easily access analysis-ready data for Landsat, Sentinel, or ALOS, but also they are developing a derived product. So this is where they're applying different algorithms to derive data that can be readily used for information sources. So part of the data that has been developed includes water observation from space. And this is really a critical data that really every country should take advantage of. So what this does is it tells you how your water bodies have been changing with time, and in terms of reliability of whether that particular water body is always there or it faces a lot of fluxes. And this, particularly in the era of climate change, is actually a very critical resource in terms of planning, in terms of knowing how to improve your management systems for agriculture, and also making sure that there's water availability. This just being one of them. So there's also they're looking at also how to support the agriculture and food security area, and they're talking to different partners in terms to ensure that we have a product that we can readily utilize to support food security challenges. So there's also the program by GeoGlam, which is looking at basically food security challenges in Africa, and basically GeoGlam for Africa in itself has been very critical for early warning. So through GeoGlam, they're able to provide the crop monitors. So basically what the crop monitors do is they use Earth observation data to guide countries and the region in terms of understanding the risk posed due to food security challenges. So different countries have adopted this at national level and are utilizing the data, the crop monitor data, to know if that particular time they're going to be facing a food security situation or not. Then we also have the support from GeoBluePlanet, which is looking at how illegal and unauthorized fishing is actually affecting the fishing stocks. And basically this really helps government in terms of realizing the losses in terms of revenue, the losses in terms of the fishing stock, and also that particular biodiversity. So they're using Earth observation data to monitor illegal boats and things like that. So basically, they have been able to support surveillance to ensure that restricted areas fishing is not happening in those areas. I also want to highlight this new program that has come up called the EO Africa Research and Development Facility that is being led by ITC. And basically this particular program is also AfriJoy is part of it, and we are supporting them as the advisory board to see how we can be able to respond to different calls for research in partnership with European researchers. And also part of the critical resources that are going to be coming out of this is the development of an information laboratory. So through this, you're going to be able to have development through the cloud and also leverage different open source your development data. Further to this, there's going to be a space academy that is going to be offering different training courses, particularly related to food security and also water. Then they'll also have an open space digital campus offering different e-learning opportunities for the African community. There is also Soils for Africa that is looking at providing a soils information system using either data that is already existing or collecting data through different partners. And majority of the soils institutions are part of this consortium that is implementing and ensuring that the soil information data is available to the African community. So lastly, I want to highlight some of the upcoming events that we have in store. So we are partnering with ESRI. ESRI is looking into how they can be able to better support the African continent in terms of either providing technical capacity or trainings or webinars and things like that. So we are looking to support a webinar that will be looking at how we can best utilize Earth observation in health. This is going to be very critical, particularly now during the pandemic, where we need the health workers to understand the value of Earth observation. We are also partnering with Geoscience Australia and Digital Earth Africa, together with the ladies of Landsat, the sisters of SAR, Women in Geospatial, to run a hackathon during the Odyssey conference that will be taking place 22nd to 25th July. I want to let everybody know that the AfriJoy Symposium this year shall be there from 17th to 19th November. Please plan to attend. We also have the Jio Symposiums taking place from 21st to 24th June. And lastly, the working group on EDI is going to be having a parallel session taking place on the 21st. We will really appreciate your participation in those. I think that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Phoebe. Thank you for opening our eyes to the activities happening on the continent in terms of Earth observation and really profiling those important issues that speak to inclusivity of women in particular, but young people increasingly as well, towards harvesting the youth demographic dividend in Agenda 2063. Okay, without wasting more time, I'm gonna go to the next speaker who will talk to us about the Gnss and Africa project, Wetland Monitoring and Assessment Service for Transboundary Basins in Southern Africa, called WeMust. It will be presented by Ms. Nosiseko Mashi, who has acquired professional training and educational qualifications in natural sciences with remote sensing and GIS competencies. Her research and applications development skills lie in the integration of remote sensing and GIS tool for modeling agroecological systems. Her work focuses on using remote sensing technology for forest management and agricultural applications, as well as liaising with other researchers for additional development of products. She is responsible for developing innovative research projects which have a high social impact by solving technical remote sensing problems, providing internal and external expertise in the domain of remote sensing to various clients. Nosiseko Mashi, the stage is yours.
Thank you, Dan. Unmute. Sorry. Okay, sorry about that. Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks, Dan, for the introduction. I'm going to give an overview of one of the Gnss in Africa projects that are funded by the African Union, which is focusing on the development of the wetland assessment and monitoring platform for the transboundary basins in the Southern Africa. Okay, how do I move to next here? How do I move to next? Okay, sorry. So the We Must platform aims to integrate various Earth observation-based data sets and products to derive actionable information to support policy implementation, decision-making, and sustainable wetland management in the 4 transboundary basins in the Southern Africa, namely the Cavale Basin, which covers Angola and parts of Namibia, the Okavango Basin, which covers parts of Botswana and Angola as well, Limpopo Basin, which covers parts of Botswana, South Africa, and Mozambique, and the Zambezi Basin, which covers parts of Zambia, Malawi, and Zimbabwe. This project is led by SASCAL, which is based in Namibia, and the consortium members include Sansa, that is the South African consortium members, include Sansa, the CPUT, and the University of the Western Cape. And then from other African countries, we have the University of Botswana, the National Remote Sensing Center of Zambia, the University of Zambia, the Midland States University of Zimbabwe. All of these members, they play different roles in the project. Sansa's main role or major role is the development of the Earth observation-based products, and also the development of the back end of the WIMA system. The current wetland products are derived from a long-term multi-sensor medium to high resolution data dating back to 1975. And these products include your wetland extent type of maps, flood maps, water quality maps, soil moisture, land cover, land use, band scar, and soil moisture. And these are integrated with the climate and weather information that is provided by SASCA. And these are available on either the basin scale or wetland scale. The We Must platform will also use medium to high resolution analysis ready data from the Digital Earth Africa platform, which hosts the Sentinel data and the Lancet series. Digital Earth Africa eliminates the burden of high-end computational resources that are required to handle the big data. This is the We Must platform. It's still under development. The aim is to give users access to information, data, statistics, trends, maps. As I said, that the products date back to 1975 for decision-making and analysis depending on the user needs. Basically, this is where we are with the development. We are hoping to have the platform up and running very soon, as it is one of the systems that are developed by the Africans for the Africans. Thank you very much. Sorry. And also, sorry, I forgot to mention this. This is the website for the We Must if you need more information. Thank you.
Thank you, Nosi, for a great presentation. Without wasting more time, in the interest of time, I'm going to move on to the next presenter, and I'll just go quickly through the bio. Dr. Stuart Bernard has experience in oceanography, and he has studied at the University of Cape Town. He's currently Chief Scientist at the South African National Space Agency and lead of the Gnss and Africa Mako South Consortium and Chief Scientific Officer of the Air Center. Without wasting more time, Dr. Stewart is going to take us through the presentation.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much, Dan, for the introduction. So the project I'm going to talk about, sorry, first of all, can you see and hear me fine?
Loud and clear, sir. Proceed, please.
Excellent. Right. So the project I'm going to talk about briefly here is actually an analog to the project that Gnss spoke of. This is a project called Marco South, and you can see it is a regional partnership to look at the development of marine and coastal services in Southern Africa, primarily based on Copernicus and the Sentinel platforms. The partnership is actually led by the CSIR in South Africa, and it includes 2 regional environmental organizations, the Benguela Current Convention and the Western Indian Ocean Marine Science Association, 2 universities from Mozambique and Zanzibar, 2 kind of applications-focused partners, which is the NSRI, the Sea Rescue Institute in South Africa, and Abelobi, which is a small-scale fishing community support group, and a Kenyan partner called Cordio that focuses on coral reef research. The types of products and services are really very much looking at using Earth observation to promote sustainable development and to even encourage growth of the blue economy. So I'm briefly going to go through the fisheries support, which I'm not going to show you a website because that's actually WhatsApp and app-based, and that basically provides Abelobi with weather forecasts and EO products to help them small-scale fish. An aquaculture support, which mostly uses ocean color and temperature to support aquaculture operations and planning. Ship traffic monitoring, which is a very powerful tool that is only for security users and basically gives a full-on heads up of all of the vessels operating in countries' exclusive economic zones. Safety at sea, which is a search assistant tool which is used by the NSRI on a daily basis. Some high-resolution water quality monitoring, and then some coral bleaching warning tools based primarily on sea surface temperature. So the first one I'll show you is this. So this is a real-time feed of all of the legal vessels in our region. I can go, for example, and select just fishing vessels. I can zoom in and I can look at any particular vessel, and I can pick up, for example, doesn't want to click on that anyway, but I can pick up things like the history, its destination, its flag, and then we will also on occasion use synthetic aperture radar to detect vessels that are not legal, i.e. have their transponders switched off. And this tool typically results in the arrest of about 2 or 3 vessels a year, either for drug shipment or for IUU fishing, which Phoebe also highlighted as a major concern. Okay, the next tool is a search and rescue tool. It's actually very simple. You go in, you say where you are, you select what kind of weather you'd like, you select, for example, what kind of target, whether it's a vessel or a person, and you either use forecast wind or your own wind, and it will go and show you, for example, a search path of where you should be searching. And as far as we're aware, this tool, as used by the NSRI, is pretty much a world first, and they are very pleased with it and use it routinely. Okay, the next tool is Fisheries and Aquaculture, and this primarily provides sea surface temperature and phytoplankton biomass, including harmful algal bloom warnings. I'm just quickly showing you the high resolution temperature here, which was actually from last night. Or there are various other products you can look at. For example, if you want declouded and merged temperature for larger regions, you can go and do that as well. Next tool is just to give you an idea of abalone in case you're interested in it. And abalone is really disruptive fisheries from hook to cook is their tagline. Okay, one of the other services is the use of Sentinel-2 and 3 to provide high resolution water quality. This is currently in a select number of sites. I've shown you in Mozambique, the Zambezi Delta. You can see if I zoom in, here is the latest water quality map. And in addition to looking at every close to daily high resolution water quality, it also provides you with a time series of information so you can see when, for example, you have an anomaly. And then the last tool I'll show you is the coral bleaching, which we actually also use for ocean heat events. So you can see here you are getting a merged temperature product from Copernicus. You can calculate an anomaly, and then you can see where you've got hotspots in the ocean. And this was actually used, we had a major ocean heat event in the last few months along the south coast here, and it was used by our Department of Agriculture, Fisheries and Forestry to monitor that event and link it in because we had quite a few fish die-outs. And Dan, thank you very much. I'm going to leave it there.
Thank you, Dr. Stewart, for the wonderful presentation. That was our last presenter for the day, and I see there's been a lot of Q&A activity in the Q&A function there. Unfortunately, we've just lost Dr. Munsami, who had to attend to other matters, as well as panelist Dr. Chisapungu, who has been actively answering some of the questions related to her expertise. I don't know if other panelists are identifying questions that directly would impact on them and they are capable of responding to, because my strategy is falling off. I had said I would divert all questions to Dr. Munsami, but unfortunately I would not be able to do that. I will open it up for the last few questions because I see we are already over the time limit by 9 minutes. So we'll take 2 or 3 burning questions and then let the panelists deal with them. Other panelists, are you identifying issues that require your immediate attention that you want to respond to or add a dimension to an existing response provided? Please feel free to just jump in the interest of time.
Dan, this is John here. I'm just looking through the questions, and there were quite a few of them on Gnss radio occultation. We have provided written answers to those questions, and I trust that that is satisfactory at this time. Just quickly going through the rest of the questions, and I think everything has been answered in writing. Yeah. So if there are any further questions, we can use the last few minutes for those. Otherwise, yeah, we can move to close.
All right. Thank you, Jonathan, for offering that response. It's an assessment I've also come to the conclusion of. In the absence of other questions, let me check one more time. Can the private sector participate in the African Instrumentation Network? Jonathan, I think that one is for you.
Okay, yes, I was just about to type an answer. Yeah, so the answer is definitely yes. We haven't partnered with the private sector before, and we are actually attempting to do this in Botswana. So we've approached one of the universities, but we've also approached someone in the private sector, or actually they approached us, and sort of where we see a mutually sort of beneficial cooperation, yeah, we can definitely form those partnerships in the private sector. So, to give you an example, the person that's in the private sector that is lobbying to assist us in the African Instrumentation Network is actually in the surveying business. And like I alluded to earlier, like the Gnss equipment is not just used, for ionospheric monitoring. It has uses in a lot of other sectors, and surveying, I would say, probably accounts for 90% of those. So actually, by forming this partnership, because of a lack of a stable functioning Gnss cores network currently in Botswana, that person in the private sector could actually benefit by hosting such equipment for us, because they would then have access and be able to use the data in a sector that's not competing with us, if that makes sense. Yeah.
I think that would be sufficient as a response, Jonathan. Thank you for offering that. I would like to believe that we've literally exhausted all the questions that have been raised in the chat box, and thank you to the audience for all the questions. I see Khabu has been very active, and it seems he's satisfied with the responses. In the absence of any more questions, I will move towards closing of this session, Africa Day 2021, under the theme Expanding the Space Data Currency for the African Economy. Thank you very much to the panelists.